If you have ever played a factory builder simulation game like Factorio or Satisfactory for more than a few hours, you have probably come to the realization that you made a decision at the beginning of the game that is now making it really hard to expand your factory without making it really messy.
It's a feeling I know really well from programming, and it's in fact normal. It's called refactoring. It just means you learn something about your project that you probably could not have known before. What I did not know is that it does not just happen during programming. Sometimes game design needs to be cleaned up as well. And in my case, as I was cleaning up game mechanics, one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I had a whole new update about...
So, for those of you new here, this is evolution simulation game The Sapling, my solo indie game project. It's a game where you can basically do two types of things. On the one hand, there are a number of scenarios tasking you to design an ecosystem that meets specific requirements. On the other, there is a sandbox where you can build your own algae, plants and animals, turn on random mutations and see how they evolve. So where exactly did I mess up? In the very first release of The Sapling, the design for food seemed relatively clean. You had herbivore mounts, which ate plants, and carnivore mounts, which ate other animals. One mount type, one food type, this is the kind of system that I want. Yeah, except that even back then it wasn't that clean, because a few weeks before the first release I was inspired by my own logo and decided that long necks should be a thing in the game. So the system worked like this if the plant had no bark, but if it did, the plant was only edible if the animal could reach leaves and fruit. In the flower update, nectar was added as a new food source, which was relatively straightforward, but then in the fight and flight update, I needed a reason for animals to have horns and sharp claws and things like that. To achieve this, I made it so that the animals can only be eaten alive if they are much smaller than the predator, which has the added advantages that life as a young animal is more dangerous, and that animals in ecosystems with a lot of predators have the tendency to evolve larger body sizes. If the prey animal is not small, the predators need to use their natural weapons to kill the prey and then eat the dead meat. On top of that, the fight and flight update added eggs, so these were also added as a food source. I'm guessing that you can all follow along now that I've drawn a flowchart while explaining, but keep in mind that so far this was not really explained anywhere in the game. Players had to figure this out on their own, so I organized some playtests to figure out if players understood this, and the answer was no, they didn't. I kinda got away with it because most players made a simpler version of it in their heads, something like this, but of course it's not what I wanted.
So the whole second part of last year I spent optimizing the game and squashing bugs with the help of many players. Special shout out to Amora Foray for reporting so many bugs and M27002 for their help answering people on the forums. But in the beginning of this year I wanted to work on something fresh, and new food types were high on my to-do list.
Obviously, complicating this system even further was out of the question, so it was refactor time. Each endpoint on the right is now a separate food type, and each mouth can eat one or more of them. The food type plant is now renamed soft plant tissue, which is like the collective name of leaves and stems without bark. Some food types have a condition that needs to be checked before it can be eaten, like height for soft plant tissue and size for eating animals as a whole, but for most of them it's straightforward. If you have a mouth that can eat eggs, you can eat eggs.
To make the transition from the old to the new system as painless as possible, I had both systems implemented side by side and then moved over food type by food type. And after that I could simply continue adding new food types. And this in turn made so many new things possible that this new food system will be one of the two main pillars of the next big update, which we'll call the food and update. Dividing the food into smaller categories introduced a new problem though, because suddenly some food types only had one or two mouths that could eat them. I don't want, for example, that all animals that eat eggs look nearly identical because they all share the same mouth.
The logical solution, of course, is just to add more mouths, so I'll just do that. To make this possible, I have really streamlined my dev tools for importing new body parts into the game. I'll spare you the details, but importing new body parts in the game is all about renaming files, putting them in the right location and tweaking configuration files. I still have to do modeling, rigging and animating, but once that is done, the whole importing workflow is basically eliminated. The result of this is that I was able to add 23 new mounts for you guys to play with, like these ones, which are all about soft plant tissue. The left one specializes for aquatic environments and the right one has the extra advantage that it can eat soft plant tissue at higher heights, so you can use it as an alternative to long necks. To communicate this fact, it has a special eating animation too, a bit like how some fins have their own swimming animation. By the way, I think the animation is where my game looks the most amateurish. So to make this animation, I again studied hours of videos of real animals, this time eating elephants. One of the things I learned is that although elephants are slow animals, all parts are continuously in motion. Slowly, but they move. But okay, these are just 2 mouths. Where did I get the inspiration for 21 others? That's where these guys come in, and it's about time. Let me explain why. Whenever you see aliens in other games and movies, a lot of them don't only look like creatures from Earth, they look like a specific group of earthly creatures humans belong to. Vertebrates. But even on Earth, there are lots of creatures that did not evolve from fish and thus look a lot more alien than these aliens. Arthropods, like insects and spiders. It's truly a missed opportunity then that most creatures in the sapling look so much like vertebrates as well. And there's another reason arthropods are a perfect match for the sapling. You know how I always say that if you simulate something you should also visualize it. Unlike vertebrate mouths, a lot of arthropod mouths are actually external, so you can see all the mouth parts and how they change and evolve. For example, this mouth specializes in meat, hence the large mandibles for some extra attack, and these maxillae for tasting. But this mouth specializes in soft plant tissue, and now the mandibles are here and the maxillae are here. Or take this mouth, specializing in nectar, where the mandibles have gone and the maxillae are over here. Again, some of these mouths come with their own eating animation. All of the arthropod mouths form a separate branch that splits off from the existing branch quite early, so we can also get rid of that stupid situation where all land animals evolving from water animals were forced through this stage. Another type of mouth where the shape already tells you what it eats is of course the beak. In the new update we will see several new beaks like this one. This was the first new body part in the game that introduces a whole new niche, the granivores. You might have noticed that so far the seeds body part tab for plants is rather empty. So you got all of these body parts like leaves and flowers, but then only one seed, which is a fruit. That's rather odd. Of course, this was just me leaving space for a future expansion, and that future is now, because there will be 15 different seed types to choose from. This is the most primitive one, which can be eaten by all mouths that can eat the new seed food type. Seeds like this just fall to the ground next to their parent, but in situations where it's beneficial for seeds to spread to places a little further away, they might evolve all kinds of extensions to catch the wind. Or when there are a lot of hungry animals around, they might evolve a thicker shell so they can only be eaten by a smaller group of mouths that can eat the new food type nuts. Besides the new beak, this is a good mouth for eating nuts.
Look, I think most programmers will agree that the need to refactor is not a sign of bad programming. It only becomes bad programming if you decide to ignore it. But never before have I done a refactor that inspired so much new functionality. We have already seen the new primitive seed, nuts whose main focus is to avoid being eaten, seeds that spread via the wind, and seeds and nuts as new food types. But there is much more. Over the coming 5 weeks I plan to release a weekly devlog in which I will explain many more new food types and seed types.